Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of a three-part webinar learning series to support the implementation and scaling of 8-week courses for institutional transformation. This is a technical assistance workshop for the colleges that are committed to institutional redesign to enable the dramatic scaling of 8-week courses. I am Dr. Christine Bailey, the Director of Institutional Strategy at the Texas Success Center, and I'll be serving as the chat moderator throughout this workshop. So I encourage you to use the chat feature for any questions as you have, and I'll be sure to raise those up at the beginning of the presentation before we shift into breakout rooms. Let me ask you and invite you to take a moment to modify your Zoom name at this time to include your first and last name and your college. I think that will help your Leader College team to better serve you. We are recording this presentation and I will post it on the Texas Success Center's event page so that you may share it as a resource to others at your institution. So before we launch into the topic of faculty buy-in, I'd like to provide some information regarding upcoming professional development opportunities. So for those who may be joining us for the first time today, I want to make sure that you know who your Leader College is. And I would very much like to thank the Odessa College, Kilgore College, and Grayson College colleges for bringing their team of specialists today to contribute to today's discussion. And after the presentation by our three Leader Colleges, we will ask you to select your college's breakout room, your Leader College's breakout room. And so keep in mind from this table, please. And this will enable you to have the time and the space for a more intimate conversation so that you can ask specific questions regarding your campus's needs. So I did share this expectation slide last month, but it's worth noting again that our CEO to CEO meetings should have started, and the goal for these regular monthly meetings is really to support the leadership at the campus as our college presidents and chancellors are setting the foundational vision for this work and supporting their implementation team. Next month, we will host our third and final webinar on the topic of dual credit and early college programs. And then on November the 14th, we will meet again as a learning community at the Texas Pathways Institute. And finally, you should have set your date for your site visit this fall with your designated Leader College. Our friends at the Trellis Foundation are so excited about the work that you're doing. They have provided the funding to enable each of our participating colleges to send members of their implementation team on a site visit to their designated Leader College. So last week, I did email each of the CEOs and the project leads for our participating colleges information on how to request reimbursements. So just as a reminder, I want to make sure that those that are traveling are collecting receipts and will be submitting those receipts and any travel maps for in-car travel. And I do recommend that you request early site visits, just as I think that will help you in your process for developing new policies and new systems. But the invoice form should be submitted before November the 30th so that we can be sure to provide that funding to you. And that invoice needs to be submitted to Felicia Day. She's our grants manager. And then it's my pleasure to personally invite you to join us and our three Leader Colleges to join us at the Pre-Institute, which will be hosted at the Texas Pathways on November the 14th. So just a little bit of context setting. This is really for just a few of the implementation team members who are really in the best position to share with our broader learning cohort what's happening at your campus and to bring new ideas back to the implementation team at your campus for consideration. So your Pathways lead at your college does have discount codes and can provide additional registration information for you to get you there to the Institute. And I want to make sure that all of our presenters that are joining us for the Pre-Institute and all of the implementation team members joining us in Dallas, you will have to opt into this workshop during the registration process. That makes sure that we are sticking within our room capacity limit and also making sure that we are counting you in for lunch, which is probably the most important part to make sure that everybody enjoys their time with us in Dallas. So what to prepare? For this institute, we're asking each college to prepare a 7-minute capstone presentation. And I've listed some of the questions here that align with the final program report, which is due on December the 15th. So thinking about these questions and sharing where you are in this process will help you complete that final deliverable for the Texas Success Center, but more importantly, will help share with others from this learning community where you are, what new systems and processes you've put in place, what are your next steps, and this will also help our leader colleges as they provide support for you to build this work into your action plan at the Institute. So as I mentioned, we will be posting the recording and the presentation slides from today on our website. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew where to go to retrieve this information. If you will go to the Texas Success Center's website, there's an events tabs, and we have all of our upcoming events listed. And then once we have the event, those go to an archived area, and that's where we will have our resources, our tools, our presentation decks. So I encourage you to visit this page. We already have everything from webinar 1 posted, and hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have the content from today posted. So thank you so much for joining us. And at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Tracy Skopek from Kilgore College to begin our presentation on faculty buy-in.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey. If you will, there we go. That's me. Thank you all for being here, and happy Friday. It seems like we're all having a 4-day week of Mondays. So I know this is a big time for everyone. One of the things I think it's important, and that my fellow mentor colleges will agree, is that as a topic, faculty buy-in is probably one of the most crucial and important topics that we discuss. We know that faculty are at the heart of what we do in higher education, and without specific buy-in, this would all probably fall apart in terms of moving through the 8-week process. So in order to have a successful transition, this is a key thing. And so as you'll see through the various school presentations, we sort of all come at this from somewhat of a same topic process, but we all sort of delved into slightly different areas. And so hopefully this will help with your conversations and your breakout. And so one of the things I wanted to share, I've been at this from both directions. I've been where it's been successful, and I've been at an institution where faculty buy-in pretty much stopped I should say lack of faculty buy-in pretty much stopped the process in its tracks for several years. So I've seen from both, and from that experience, I found that there are some key ingredients that are necessary institutionally. And part of that has to do with recognizing the importance of faculty to the process. Again, if they're not comfortable with this process, if they're not into the process, then it's probably not going to work as well as we think it's going to. I really think it becomes something that is important that we understand in this particular case, that faculty need to be integrated into the whole process of moving to the 8 weeks, instead of it sort of being something that happens to them, which I think sometimes is the tack we take. But in fact, that is something that they are participating in, as opposed to happening to them. Keeping focus on the big picture. It's too easy in some cases to start going off in the weeds and getting off track about all the little things, the fear of how am I going to make load? How am I going to, do those things? It's absolutely important to address those. But as we'll talk a little bit more later, keeping focused on the big picture of this, what this does for students, how this makes a successful student, and sort of keep that focus. And that can be, of course, done with data, but also, you need some cheerleaders when it comes to that sort of thing. And then probably most crucial is leadership just needs to be all in. This comes from the president, CEO on down, through the leadership. Everyone needs to be fully on board and fully invested in this process. Next slide. All right, I wanted to run you real quick through a little bit of our most recent data. This is our last 5 years, and as you can see, you'll notice a 4% of 8-week courses in fall of 2018, and then 60% in fall of 2019. Well, obviously it was our scaling transition year, and you can see we've pretty much maintained that throughout, and we pulled fall because that's usually our biggest semester for courses, and so we're still around that number right now. We have done a little bit of section management, which is why our number for this current fall went down a little bit, but you'll notice also that we're looking at about a 70-30 split pretty consistently between our transfer courses and our workforce courses in terms of which ones are 8-week and which ones are not. And we'll be getting into some of the specifics with the other colleges about what typically cannot move to an 8-week schedule. Nursing is usually one of those big programs that doesn't work that way. And then of course, dual credit will be the topic of our next webinar, but we do have some dual credit 8-week, but again, those are a little bit more problematic for some schools. So again, it kind of shows you where we went, and we do a review periodically of did something such as a core class move to 16 weeks, or are we only offering one section of that? What does it look like? We want to make sure students can get solid 8-week schedules. So again, that's just sort of a snapshot of our percentages when it comes to what we're actually doing. Next slide. All right, so some of the tools, if you will, and some of the concerns that come with trying to get faculty buy-in or changing the culture to embrace 8-week courses and 8-week scheduling have to do a lot with not understanding why make the change. This seems to be going well as far as I can tell. I don't understand why we need to go ahead and do this. And so it really boils down to what KC did, which is show me the data. It's really important to show faculty the data, to let them explore the data from other schools, bring those in, And also do a comparison to where your school is right now. You need to pull your own student success data. What's your DFW rate? What does that look like? How many students are stopping out? So the data piece, I think, is very critical to show the students what we can do with that. And there are plenty of schools willing to share their data when it comes to the success. Then we also, again, as I talked about a minute ago, the how pieces, the how fears, if you will, tend to sometimes take over, and then the rumor mill can start going crazy. And the next thing you know, everybody is up in arms and talk themselves out of it. It's not to say that those things are not important. They absolutely are, but they're all fixable. And that's what I would always tell faculty when they would come to those things. It's all fixable. This is not, we're not we're not inventing this ourselves. This is a model that has been out there. And so there are ways to work this. What does that look like? Big concern with co-recs. A lot of schools don't want to move their co-recs. We did. So I think, there's certainly best practices when it comes to that. STEM faculty often find that I don't understand how we're going to be able to fit labs in, with a longer time period. How is that going to work? What about content? And so, I have too much content. How am I going to fix that? Scheduling, again, it's just wrapping your mind around sort of this kind of transition. And again, there are tools and ways to do that. So I think addressing those fears ahead of time, and especially with load and overload, we know those are those sacred cows of how are we going to make this work. And we find in many cases, and I think my faculty would agree, that it actually makes for an easier load, because most of the time you're not doing a crazy combination of things. You can focus, just like the students can focus on 2 8-week courses at a time. Faculty have some of that same ability instead of, a bunch of things going on at once. So I think that's a critical thing to overcome initially. And then, of course, we always hear the sacrificing quality and rigor, but the question then becomes, well, what do you do in the summer? Most of the time, you're already doing 6 to 8 week courses in the summer, sometimes even less than that. Are you sacrificing rigor there? No, we're absolutely not. And so you really just have to kind of drill down to focusing on the core objectives and what are the student learning outcomes? Are we meeting those? And then some things, we just have to work with faculty to and I've been faculty, and I know it's hard sometimes to let it go, to let certain projects or certain assignments to let it go, and that was coined by one of our faculty members. And I always put the Frozen song, Let It Go, up there when it comes to that. So, there's ways to do this that I think are doable, that we can provide tools and supports to overcome those specific barriers. And then the last one, from our, again, this is not a complete exhaustive list, but again, working through the exemptions. And I believe Grayson's going to talk about this a little bit more. But you need to have some consistency in what classes are sort of waived from the 8-week. What are your processes and standards? Kind of change the narrative from why should we change from 16 to 8 week scheduling to sort of why not change. That's flipping the narrative just a little bit. It's a very minor thing, but I think, it provides a good message. Again, keeping your messaging strong and consistent, and then just making sure you have a fair process. If it's kind of picking and choosing across the college, that creates a less stable process, and a lack of fairness can really sort of come in and undo some of the great work that faculty have done. So that's some of the ways that we have approached this. Next slide. So just a few tips on getting started. Again, listen to your faculty concerns, bring them in, talk to your faculty senate, your faculty association, hold listening sessions if you have not already gotten through to that process. Find your faculty champions. They're out there. There's plenty of faculty who have already done 8 weeks or who come from other institutions that were 8 weeks and can tell their story. and be that champion or multiple champions that you need. And then just be sure to include faculty leadership, but all, various areas of the faculty in the planning, implementation, and reviewing. This is going to be key because we are going to have to, they have to understand they need to be part of this because there's going to be changes. You need to be flexible, and what you did the first time around may not always be what you end up with. So there's, it's a process. And so recognizing that and making sure that they're included in that, and it's not done, at such a high level that it's, again, sort of happening to them. I think that's a really big process. And finally, I brought my team with me. These are some of them you probably met in Houston last spring as well. We have Jason Graves, who's chair of our language development and English professor, Dr. David Fontenot, our psychology instructor, Michael Ferguson, chair of our auto tech and public services, who is also a criminal justice instructor, Alicia Osteen, is chair of our industrial technologies and a woman of many talents. And then I believe we have Mary Shaw, who's chair of our biological sciences, who has been converting some of the harder classes like AMP to 8-week, especially 8-week online. So I think this is a great group to be able to answer your questions. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Grayson College. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Logan Maxwell, who is Director of Success Initiatives at Grayson, who will be leading the team today.
All right, thank you. So like she said, my name is Logan Maxwell. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And I have some other members of my team here today. Dr. Chase Machen, he's our Dean of Academic and Workforce Instruction and was with us in our struggles to transition during our 8 weeks. At the time, I was the chair of mathematics and engineering. For those STEM folks, I'd be happy to share some words of wisdom with you. And we have Dr. Karen Campbell, who is our Associate Dean of Academic and Workforce Instruction, who was our English lead at the time. So any English language arts questions, she'll be able to help out. And then we also have Dr. Michael Ayers, who is also the Associate Dean of Academic and Workforce Instruction. So I'll just start with, overview. As Kilgore College mentioned, show the data. So I remember we had I was part of the team that went to Odessa during the summer. And so I'll just start with what not to do for your faculty. We went out in the summer. President came back and said, we're going 8 weeks. And so faculty returned from the summer without any knowledge and were told they were going to 8 weeks and they had a year to do it. And so I would advise to, ease that into your faculty if you have not already done so. And so I think that was one thing that we did not do well, but there were other things that we did do well. And I think leaning on the data is one. You can see from our 8-week success course success rates that they've been steadily increasing and continue to increase. We also have the comparison between fall, spring, and 16-week. And so you can see, our 8 weeks overpower our 16-week in each of those terms. And so I think, the data speaks volumes, and, our mission at Grayson College is student success. And so when you can see that student success is our one priority and that the data shows that it is increasing, it's hard to argue with that. If you go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to touch on some specific courses that were not in the 8-week format. So it's important to understand, and for faculty to understand, not everything has to go 8 weeks. And in fact, some courses literally cannot go 8 weeks, as Kilgore College mentioned. And so you can see just some of ours, our upper level math courses, some ag science courses involving livestock and reproduction, your fine arts, so some of your music and arts, viticulture and enology. We left our co-rec courses as 16 weeks because our faculty determined that their best practice was a concurrent model instead of an 8-week model. And that's up for their, up to their departments to decide what is best for them. Music private lessons, you can see our workforce courses, computer science, our electrical technology and police academy stayed 16-week. And then of course, some of our health science courses with the clinical components were difficult to transition, even though some of them did try. So our LVN program tried hard and they ended up having to go back to 16 weeks. So that's important to understand as well. You can have excellent faculty and they can do their best, but you have to have the understanding that, sometimes it just doesn't work. And so you may have to go back to a 16-week model. However, our medical lab technology program did transition to 8 weeks and is still working in that realm. We do not have any dual credit courses at this time in the 8-week model. That's not to say that in the future that won't transition, but at this point, we still don't have any in the 8 weeks. However, it's important to know that, faculty understand, even though some of those courses, and I'll give STEM courses as a reason that, they may not transition right away, but given time, they might transition. And so we had, especially our math and science faculty, it's important to provide them with the resources to determine if they can or can't go 8 weeks. And so, we invited some folks to campus to talk about a flipped classroom and the hybrid model to see if that would work. And most of our gen ed courses did go that route as a hybrid model. Leadership facilitated meetings with other institutions that had already gone 8 weeks. So Odessa, some of our departments, specifically our science department, met with some of the science folks over at Odessa to see what are you doing or what are you planning on doing. It's important to know faculty don't have to recreate the wheel. If something's already working at an institution, doesn't mean it's going to work at your institution, but it never hurts to try if someone's already doing it. But just small department meetings for our folks worked best. I think they were able to have conversations on what would work best at Grayson College for our specific students. And I think that's important. And so every department got the chance to decide, what would go and what wouldn't go. And one thing I think we did well was to develop a process to determine what would go 16 or what would go 8 week and what would stay 16 week. If you'd move to the next slide. So here was our 8 week waiver process. We had a committee that was made up of our vice president of instruction, the instructional deans, faculty association president, the department chairs, and then our health science program directors. And so the department chairs and health science directors would bring the faculty proposals to the appropriate dean. We had a form that they had to fill out, which basically stated what course they wanted to stay 8 weeks, being exempted from the 8 week model, and the reason why. And so after the dean approval, those courses and their justifications were brought to the committee for a review. And the deans and the committee, took certain things into consideration when reviewing those proposals. Most of them, it was due to contact hours. If there was just too many contact hours to go to an 8 week model, or other things that were problematic. So a potential, example is welding, although most of our welding courses have since moved to the 8 week model. And so, again, it's not to say that, right out of the gate, everyone has to move. Given faculty some time, they can make the adjustment themselves. But it could also have involved faculty who were just challenged by that idea at first and, asking for time. But, some reasons, as nursing was mentioned, is one of the bigger ones. Clinicals, it's just too hard to get that to fit into an 8 week model, even though some of our faculty did try. It's important to set deadlines. You have to be able to have time for those courses that are determined to go 8 week to let faculty develop, new curriculum, new models, new instructional strategies, and have those resources available for them to make that change and that transition. And just one thing I wanted to add before moving over to Odessa is, don't overthink it. As was mentioned by Kilgore College, you can figure out load, you can figure out some other processes. The how is not the problem, right? You need to find your faculty champions and have them really convince others to go 8 weeks. And I'm excited for the breakouts and some questions that will come up, and hopefully we can provide some answers. So at this point, I will turn it over to Odessa.
Great. We have Dr. Janice Hicks with us, Vice President of Institutional Effectiveness at Odessa.
Thank you. Happy Friday. Here at Odessa College, we've had a fun day. We did a campus cleanup earlier, so we're all in our t-shirts, and we also get off at 1 o'clock. And so I don't want to hold the deans too long. And so I'll introduce our team, Robert Rivas, who serves as Chief of Staff, as well as the interim dean for business and industry. Mr. Rivas has been here for 11 years, so he was here before we went to 8 weeks. So I'll ask him to chime in at some point as we go through our slides. Dean Evans, who's our dean over liberal arts and education, and he's been with the institution for about 3 years. And then Dean Alyssa Cornelius, who's our dean of health sciences, and she is a nurse. And so I would love for her to chime in and talk about the nursing department. She's been here for about 8 years now. And so she can talk about how our nursing courses are in the 8-week format. And so I know you've heard from other institutions where the faculty, it didn't work out that way, but here at OC, we were able to make that happen. So you can go to the next slide. So we've been doing 8-week courses here, and we are an 8-week institution. Over 80% of our courses are 8 weeks, and that has been that way since 2014. So about 8 years. But as we think about 8-week courses and faculty involvement, faculty engagement, we have to back up a couple of years and talk about how we change the dynamics of our faculty and student relationship through what we call our drop rate improvement program. And so in 2011, we introduced this program, and faculty accepted certain commitments to get to know their students, and we embedded some AVID strategies. And so through the drop rate improvement program in 2011, we were able to increase success rates, decrease drop rates, and to reduce some equity gaps. So on the next slide, you'll see what the drop rate improvement program is all about. And it's really all about that faculty-student relationship. And so if we don't have that relationship in place, it doesn't matter the modality, it doesn't matter the length of course, it doesn't matter what you teach or how much harder your course is than other courses. And so we ask faculty not to change their teaching, not to change their content, but we ask them to add 4 things. And so we ask them to learn the name of students within that first week, whether you're face-to-face or online. We ask them to monitor and intervene quickly. And so if you notice something is off about a student, or then get them to advising, get them to financial aid, get them to our food pantry as soon as possible. We ask that they have one-on-one interactions with students. And then the last one is what we call masters of paradox. And so that means highly structured expectations and penalties for late assignments and however you choose to set up your course expectations, but flexibility when appropriate, because we know the community college student is a working student, is a student who has a family, a student who may not have a lot of time. And so that's up to the faculty's discretion. And so this is, I'm not a gardener and I don't have a green thumb, it's mostly Black, but we are like fertilizing the soil here. So we've transformed how our faculty interacts with students. And so on the next slide, you'll see with that, we were able to scale 8-week courses. And so we've scaled 8-week courses in 2014. The next slide, please. And so some of the instructional considerations, so at that time, a team was pulled together similar to what the other institutions, so Kilgore and Grayson has done. They pulled a team together. And prior to me being at Odessa 3 years ago, I was at a different institution, and I was part of an 8-week team that was together, and we looked at different things: course design, the schedule design, load, overload. But I love what we've talked about today in both institutions. The weeds, it's the devil in the details, but don't let the devil stop you if this is the best thing to do for your students when you look at the data. And I think each of our institutions have experienced some good success rates and some good student outcomes. Faculty training, we have a wonderful professional learning center, a professional or center for teaching and learning that was a huge part of this. And Robert Reeves, who's on the call, was a part of that team at the time that helped faculty transform their courses. And so as you go from 16 weeks to 8 weeks, it's not just, okay, we'll remove half of the chapters. The book has 16 chapters and no, you have to go in and redesign the courses and look at your student learning outcomes. And so you take those outcomes and then you build from there, and keeping in mind what the modality is. It could be face-to-face or online. The calendar, we had to shift the way we did our academic calendar. And so that's another consideration. And then also dual credit. And then I know we have another webinar to talk about dual credit. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the do's. Do find a champion. We had a champion right away in our faculty senate. And I think this came up, this idea at a president's council, as they were talking about what can we do to help more students be successful. Review your course and program level outcomes, because there could be redundancies within a course and maybe 4 different points where it's meeting that outcome. Do we need 4 different times to review that concept, or would 2 suffice? And so those are the kind of conversations that faculty within their departments and within their programs do have some grace. Every course is different. Every discipline is different. And so there are moments where we might not be able to do 8 weeks, and that's okay. And we created a process for that. Do convert all your sections. And so we do have an exception and exemption process, and I'll show you that list in a minute. But go all in and convert all of your sections that you have on campus to 8 weeks. And that's a cleaner way to offer it. So on the next slide, we want to share, do not use the textbook as an excuse. And so this is course design and curriculum development. And it's also an opportunity for OER as well. And so as you're designing a 8-week format of your course, could you look into OER or a different instructional tool? Do not allow courses to be 16 weeks and 8 weeks. And so what that means is there are some 16 weeks classes, and each campus talks about that. But for our schedule, if the courses offer 8 weeks on our campus, it is an 8-week course. So we don't have, well, students can take it 16 weeks or 18 weeks or 8 weeks. And so if you've converted to 8 weeks, you are 8 weeks for that course. And then our president, Dr. Williams, says this all the time: do not be afraid to burn the boats. We've done things in higher education a certain way for a long time. We know that we're not doing enough for enough students. And so as you figure out the best groove for your campus, and as faculty figure out their rhythm and what makes sense for their courses and their departments, burn the boats. There's no reason to look back and try to bring some of those things with you. And so on the next slide, here are a list of our exempted courses. And so they're at the time before 8 weeks was completely institutionalized, at OC, it's just what we do. We had a committee that reviewed which courses would be approved to continue 16 weeks. Right now, we do that through our curriculum committee. So it's just part of our normal day-to-day. And so internships, practicums, clinicals, all of our dual credit offsite at the high schools, that's still 16 weeks. We have varsity kind courses, visual and performing arts courses, and then you'll see welding, chemistry courses, the organic chem, co-recs. And so we've been trying different things with our co-rec model. And so some of our co-recs might still be 16 weeks. So on the next slide is a little bit of our data. And so before I share this, I want to invite Dean Cornelius, Alyssa, if you can talk a couple of minutes just about what you guys at your faculty were able to do with the nursing program.
Sure. So quickly, and we can go into this in our breakout for those of you who are curious. In our nursing programs, we have LVN LVN dual credit, and then traditional RN. We have a mix of 8-week and 16-week courses in our two adult LVN and RN, but in our dual credit, we're 100% 8-week across the board in our LVN dual credit program. And so we have wonderful success rates. Our dual credit cohort, we have 3 cohorts in dual credit. They average about a 93 to a 96% pass rate on NCLEX. And so those are selective entry programs, which, you know, helps us when we're selecting students from the districts. But yeah, 100% is 8-week in our dual credit programs.
Thank you. And so before I end, I want to share our last slide. This is success rate data over 11-year period for us. And so this is at the course success level. And so we moved from 10% drop rate on average to 3% drop rate and about a 85% success rate. And so we're happy to continue the conversation in the chat or in the breakout room. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Spokek.
All right, thank you. All right, it's time for our breakout. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everybody's getting back in. All right, we have just a couple of minutes left. I know that was not nearly enough time for everyone. So feel free to email your lead college any questions, and we'll be happy to take those. I'm going to turn it over real quick to Dr. Hicks from Odessa to see if there was any key takeaway.
Absolutely. In our breakout session, we talked a lot about faculty workload. And so the implications of that for the full-timers, as well as part-timers and adjuncts. And so we also talked about the why. And so if we can get the talking points and get the why right, majority of the time faculty will buy in and they'll do what needs to happen to make this the best program for students.
Great, thank you. Dr. Maxwell, Grayson?
I would say we focused more on the professional development offered for faculty, how departments determined, you know, how best to shift to 8 weeks. And then also, you know, how are students taking courses? So are they taking 2 and 2? Are they taking 3 in an 8-week term? How do you determine that? What's your policy on that? So we discussed about that. And then also the co-requisite model, as was mentioned earlier.
Great. Yeah. And so we're one of our key takeaways, I think, is that data is the key, the why. Again, looking at data, especially retention data, maybe credit hour data count. Again, you know, why do 8 weeks? If your students are taking too many credit hours, 16 or a mix of those, often harms that scenario. And then that, you know, sort of having flexibility in your classroom offerings in terms of how you do it, the modality. Seems to be a key as well. I think that pretty much does it. So it looks like we have on our screen, of course, make note of the October 5th webinar for dual credit and all things early college. Otherwise, reach out to your groups to make sure we have your questions, and then we can certainly address some of these during the site visits and tailor those specifically to your concerns, at least on the KC side. So thank you all. Have a great weekend.